The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom glitter, casting 1,000 fractured lights on the assembled faces. I sip my champagne, the bubbles a fizzy contrast to the ice in my veins. On stage, radiant in a borrowed spotlight, is my sister, Amelia. She's accepting an award for her innovative tech company, Innovate X, my company, the one she stole. Her eyes, bright with false humility, sweep the room and then snag on mine. Just for a heartbeat, panic flickers across her perfectly made up face. She sees me, even with the new hair, the subtle changes to my features. I offer a serene, knowing smile. I touch the discreet earpiece. Marco, I murmur to my assistant. Proceed with phase 3. 3 years ago, I would have stormed that stage, a whirlwind of righteous fury. But death and rebirth teach patience, and I have learned to wait. It all started with a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic, a constant reminder of my vulnerability. While I lay there, hovering between life and whatever came after, Amelia wasn't just by my side holding my hand. She was systematically dismantling my life. Innovate X, born from my late nights and ramen noodle dinners, the company that was my everything, slipped through my fingers like sand. She'd always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. It wasn't hard for her to convince them I was unwell. Mentally unstable was the phrase she'd whispered, her voice laced with fake concern. And they'd believed her. Of course they did. Honey, Amelia's just trying to help, Mom had said, her eyes filled with that pity I'd come to despise. She's taking on so much for you. Dad just nodded, his usual tell when he was uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge Amelia. It's for the best, sweetheart. Until you're better. Better, as if I was a broken toy. The betrayal cut deeper because it wasn't just Amelia. My best friend, Sarah, the one I'd shared every dream and every secret with since kindergarten, became Amelia's right hand. I remembered our tearful promises of loyalty, of always having each other's backs. Now she stood beside Amelia at press conferences, nodding along to the lies, her ambition glinting in her eyes, a cold replacement for the warmth I once knew. The day I saw her on a magazine cover, hailed as Amelia's brilliant COO, a piece of my heart shattered. How could you, Sarah? I'd managed to croak into the phone, my voice weak from disuse after the accident. It's just business, Alex, she'd replied, her tone clipped, devoid of emotion. Amelia offered me a future. What were you offering from a hospital bed? Then there was Daniel. My Daniel. My fiancé. The man I was going to build a life with. Amelia had always harbored a quiet jealousy towards our relationship, but I never imagined she would poison him against me. She fed him the same lies she fed our parents, that I was paranoid, delusional, a danger even to myself. He visited less and less, his face a mask of confusion and then, eventually, fear. Alex, I think we need a break, he'd stammered during one of his final awkward visits. Amelia said, she said you're not yourself. And you believe her? I'd asked, the words catching in my throat. He couldn't meet my eyes. She's worried about you. We all are. The final nail in the coffin of my old life was Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. A man I'd trusted implicitly who'd helped me draft the very patents Amelia now claimed as her own. Bribed. It was as simple and as ugly as that. While I was fighting for my life, he was signing away my legacy, transferring ownership of InnovateX to Amelia. The paperwork was all neat, all legal, all a devastating fraud. I remember the day I was finally discharged, a ghost of my former self. I'd walked into the InnovateX offices, my offices, only to be met by security. Amelia had been called. She'd swept in, all feigned compassion. Alex, darling, she'd said, her voice dripping with insincerity. You shouldn't be here. You need to rest. This is my company, Amelia, I'd said, my voice trembling with a rage I was too weak to fully express. She'd actually patted my arm. It's my company now, dear. I'm taking care of it. For you. The world saw Amelia as the brilliant innovator, the compassionate sister, the savvy businesswoman. I saw the viper. And as I slowly rebuilt myself, physically and emotionally, in the quiet anonymity of a new city, a new identity. A single thought burned within me. They would all pay. Not with loud confrontations or messy scenes. No, my revenge would be silent, precise, and devastating. They had tried to bury me, but they didn't realize I was a seed. The first few months after the accident, a suspicious brake failure that was too quickly dismissed, were a blur of pain, physiotherapy, and a gnawing helplessness. I'd wake up screaming from nightmares where Amelia's smiling face morphed into something monstrous. My parents' visits were strained, filled with platitudes and a refusal to acknowledge the truth I tried to tell them. They preferred Amelia's narrative, the brilliant, stable daughter taking care of her troubled sibling. "She's doing so well with the company, Alexandra," my mother would say, oblivious to the daggers her words plunged into me. "Such a head for business, just like your grandfather." Sarah's betrayal was a constant ache. We'd built imaginary empires in her treehouse, sworn blood oaths of eternal friendship. How had that girl turned into the cool, calculating woman who now strategized with my usurper? I saw her in online articles, always a step behind Amelia, her expression one of shrewd competence. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my best friend's skin. And Daniel. His abandonment was perhaps the most personal wound. He hadn't just left me. He'd believed the worst of me. Amelia had played him like a violin, preying on his own insecurities, his desire for a stable partner. I later found out she'd started comforting him not long after I was hospitalized. The thought of them together, of her hands on him, made me physically ill. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, was a colder, more calculated betrayal. He was a man of the law, sworn to protect his clients. But Amelia's money, or perhaps her threats, had been more persuasive than his ethics. He'd been the gatekeeper of my dreams, and he'd willingly handed the keys to the thief. The doctors had told me I was lucky to be alive. Some days, lying in that sterile room, I didn't feel lucky. I felt erased. But slowly, a different kind of fire began to burn through the despair. Not the hot, impulsive anger of my youth, but a cold, hard resolve. They had taken everything. They thought I was broken. They were wrong. I would come back, not as Alexandra, the victim, but as someone else entirely. Someone they would never see coming, and I would watch them fall one by one from the empire they built on my ruin. 3 years later, I am Eve, a name I chose for its symbolism of new beginnings. I'm at a family dinner, a rare occasion I've been cajoled into attending by my parents, who still cling to the hope of a reconciled family. The air is thick with forced pleasantries. Amelia, ever the star, chooses this moment for an announcement. "Daniel and I are getting married," she trills, flashing an obscenely large diamond ring. It's the ring Daniel had picked out for me. My stomach clenches, but I force a bright smile. "Oh, Amelia, Daniel, that's wonderful news," I say, my voice perfectly pitched with feigned delight. "I'm so happy for you both." Daniel shifts uncomfortably, a flicker of something, guilt, in his eyes before it's quickly masked. Amelia beams, lapping up the attention. My parents are ecstatic. Sarah, also present, offers a smug little smile in my direction. They think I'm still the broken Alexandra, easily crushed. Later that week, I arrange a quiet meeting. Isabella Rossi, a fiery Italian designer and, more importantly, Daniel's ex-girlfriend from before me. The one he'd left rather abruptly, claiming he needed to find himself. I had my suspicions then, but now I need facts. Isabella is wary at first. "Why should I talk to you?" she asks, her dark eyes narrowed. "Because Daniel is about to marry the woman who destroyed my life," I say simply. "And I have a feeling he didn't treat you much better." It doesn't take long for her story to tumble out. Daniel hadn't just left her. He'd apparently two-timed her for months with a business acquaintance before unceremoniously dumping her via text. He'd also, it seemed, borrowed a significant sum of money from her to invest in a can't-miss opportunity, which he never repaid. And, the pièce de résistance, he'd had a penchant for taking rather intimate photos and videos, often without explicit ongoing consent. Isabella, scorned and still bitter, is more than happy to provide copies. "For your research," she says with a predatory smile. The information is gold. A carefully curated selection of photos, Nothing too explicit to be illegal, but certainly enough to cause maximum embarrassment. Finds its way to a notorious gossip blogger, along with an anonymous tip about Daniel's colorful romantic history and questionable financial dealings with past lovers. The timing is exquisite. 3 days before the lavish wedding Amelia has been planning for months. The scandal erupts. Tech tycoon's fiancé, a cad and a cheat? Scream the headlines. Amelia's perfectly crafted image takes a direct hit. The wedding is, of course, postponed indefinitely. The public fallout is delicious. Amelia calls me, her voice hysterical. Alex, Eve, whatever you call yourself, you have to help me. This is a disaster. Daniel is a wreck. My reputation? I listen calmly, offering soothing, sisterly advice. Oh, Amelia, this is dreadful, but you're strong. You'll get through this. We need to manage the narrative. I even help her draft a public statement, full of carefully chosen words about privacy and malicious rumors, all while my assistant, Marco, is discreetly feeding more tidbits to a rival blogger. Details about how Daniel was already deeply entangled with Amelia while still engaged to me, painting Amelia not as a victim of Daniel's deceit, but as a willing participant, a homewrecker. The story shifts subtly. Sympathy for Amelia wanes, replaced by a more critical scrutiny of her own past actions. Daniel is, of course, ruined, but Amelia, tied to him, is tarnished. Her pristine image has its first significant crack. Thank you, Eve, she sobs over the phone a week later, the wedding venue now dark, the caterers canceled. I don't know what I would have done without you. You're the only one who understands. Of course, Amelia, I say, my voice gentle. What are sisters for? I hang up, a cold smile playing on my lips. Phase 1 of her public dismantling was complete. She was so busy looking for the overt attack, she never saw the silent, smiling assassin in her own family. She has no idea how much more I understand, or what I'm truly for. The family dinner where Amelia announced her engagement felt like a scene from a play I'd rehearsed 1,000 times in my head. I watched Daniel, his face a little softer, a little more lined than I remembered. When his eyes met mine, there was a brief, unguarded moment. Was it regret? Or just the awkwardness of seeing a ghost from his past? Amelia, oblivious or perhaps deliberately cruel, draped herself over him, the diamond a beacon of her triumph. You'll have to help me pick out a bridesmaid dress, Eve, Amelia had said, her smile too wide. Something that says, supportive sister. I'd be honored, I'd replied, my own smile a carefully constructed mask. The meeting with Isabella was in a small, dimly lit cafe, the kind where secrets feel safe. Isabella was all sharp angles and simmering resentment. She'd been beautiful, and Daniel had clearly been captivated by her fire, a fire he'd tried to extinguish, then discard. He told me I was too much, Isabella said, stirring her espresso with unnecessary force. Too passionate, too demanding. He wanted someone simpler, more malleable, I suppose. She looked at me then. You don't seem simple. I wasn't, I agreed, until he and my sister decided I was complicated and needed to be removed from the equation. The photos were worse than I'd imagined. Daniel, preening and self-satisfied. Other women, their faces obscured, but the implication clear. There were also screenshots of messages, callous and dismissive. He was a user, plain and simple. Amelia, in her hunger for what was mine, had hitched her wagon to a very flawed star. The day the story broke, I was at a yoga retreat, finding my center, as they say. My phone, when I finally checked it, was exploding with notifications. Marco had executed the leak flawlessly. The chosen blogger was known for their salacious but usually well-sourced stories. Daniel's carefully constructed image as a devoted fiancé and upstanding businessman crumbled overnight. Amelia's frantic calls were a symphony to my ears. Her panic was palpable. She, who always had to be in control, was spinning. They're saying horrible things, Eve, that Daniel is a predator, that he used women. People can be so cruel, Amelia, I'd murmured, projecting sympathy. But you know the truth, don't you? Daniel wouldn't do those things. A little seed of doubt planted just for her. The best part was watching her try to salvage her own reputation. She distanced herself from Daniel publicly, claiming she was shocked and appalled by the revelations. But the mud stuck. She'd chosen him. She'd paraded him. She was linked to his disgrace. Her attempts to play the victim rang hollow, especially when the second wave of information, subtly steered by Marco, hinted at her own complicity in his earlier betrayals, specifically ours. My parents were, for once, speechless, their golden daughter caught in a scandal. They called me seeking what? Comfort. An explanation? It's a terrible business, I told my mother, but Amelia is strong. She'll manage. I kept my tone neutral, supportive, the perfect, unassuming sister. The cancellation of the wedding was announced quietly, a stark contrast to the fanfare of the engagement. Daniel disappeared from public view, his career in tatters. Amelia was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered fairy tale, her business momentarily overshadowed by her personal drama. And I, Eve, the quiet observer, watched it all unfold, a silent satisfaction warming me from within. She was learning that actions have consequences, even for her. And this was just the beginning. A few months later, my parents, in a desperate attempt to project an image of familial harmony and to cheer Amelia up after her public humiliation, announce a lavish family vacation, a luxury cruise through the Greek Isles. To celebrate Amelia's continued business success, my mother chirps, conveniently ignoring the recent stock dip InnovateX experienced post-scandal. I try to decline, but my mother's tearful plea about family solidarity wears me down. It would mean so much to Amelia, Eve. She needs her sister. Reluctantly, I agree, the cruise is as ostentatious as expected. Amelia, having somewhat recovered her composure, is back to her old tricks. She subtly tries to push me out of key family events, ensuring I'm at the back of family photos, accidentally forgetting to invite me to a private dinner with the ship's captain, making snide little comments about my quiet lifestyle compared to her dynamic career. "Oh, Eve, you wouldn't enjoy this. It's all terribly boring business talk," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand. Daniel is thankfully absent, a sore subject still best avoided. Sarah, however, is present, ever Amelia's shadow, her eyes still holding that cool assessment whenever she looks at me. One evening, while Amelia and Sarah are engrossed in a networking opportunity with some dubious-looking investors, I use the ship's surprisingly decent Wi-Fi to do some digging. Marco has been keeping tabs on InnovateX, and his latest report is interesting. The company is struggling. Their flagship product, the Phoenix operating system, my brainchild, the very core of what made InnovateX revolutionary, is plagued with bugs and development delays. Amelia, it seems, could steal an idea, but she couldn't replicate my innovative spark or my meticulous attention to detail in its execution. I find online forums buzzing with user complaints, developers expressing frustration. One particular thread catches my eye. A senior developer from InnovateX, using an anonymous handle, details a critical flaw in the core architecture, a flaw that could lead to massive data breaches if exploited. A flaw I had identified and was working on resolving just before my accident. Amelia, in her rush to launch and monetize, had clearly ignored my detailed notes, or more likely, hadn't understood their significance. It's almost too easy. A new anonymous email account, a carefully worded message outlining the precise nature of the manufacturing flaw and its potential catastrophic consequences, sent directly to the CEO of InnovateX's biggest client, a massive multinational corporation that relies on the Phoenix OS for its global operations. I include snippets from the anonymous developer's posts as corroborating evidence, and even a redacted copy of one of my old internal memos. One Amelia's lawyer clearly missed when wiping my existence from the company records. Back on the cruise, the atmosphere shifts dramatically a few days later. Amelia is constantly on her phone, her face pale, her usual arrogance replaced by a frantic energy. Whispers reach my parents. "A major client is threatening to pull out," my father mutters to my mother, his brow furrowed. Something about a catastrophic security risk. The celebratory family gathering that evening turns into a stage for Amelia's meltdown. She snaps at the waiters, argues with our parents, and glares at anyone who even looks at her. Sarah tries to calm her, but Amelia is beyond reason. "It's a conspiracy!" she shrieks, slamming her wineglass down so hard it shatters. "Someone is trying to destroy me, to destroy InnovateX." Her eyes, wild and accusatory, sweep across the table and land on me. For a moment, pure, unadulterated suspicion flashes there. But I meet her gaze with serene, pitying concern. "Oh, Amelia, that's terrible," I say softly. "Who would do such a thing?" Her certainty wavers. "I am Eve, the quiet, unassuming sister, the one who offers comfort, not conflict." The accusation dies on her lips, replaced by a frustrated sob. The family vacation, intended to celebrate her success, is now a testament to her impending failure. And as she crumbles, I feel another layer of the icy grief around my heart begin to thaw, replaced by the cold, clean satisfaction of justice, meticulously served. The ship was a gilded cage. Every morning, my mother would insist on family breakfasts, where Amelia would recount her supposed triumphs, and Sarah would nod along like a well-trained poodle. I'd sip my coffee, offering bland, supportive comments, all the while feeling the undercurrents of their unease. Amelia wasn't as confident as she pretended. Innovate X was her only claim to legitimacy, and if that faltered, her entire persona would collapse. "We're launching Phoenix 2.0 next quarter," Amelia announced one morning, a little too brightly. "It's going to revolutionize the industry. Again." "That's ambitious," I commented mildly. "Given the feedback on the current version?" Sarah shot me a sharp look. "All innovative products have teething issues, Eve. We have the best team working on it." "Of course," I'd replied, my smile never wavering. "Your best team." The information from Marco was a lifeline. He was my eyes and ears, a brilliant tech analyst I'd headhunted from a rival firm under my new identity. He was fiercely loyal, having his own reasons to dislike corporate sharks like Amelia. His reports were detailed, precise, and damning. InnovateX was cutting corners, pushing developers too hard, and Amelia's leadership style was described as erratic and tyrannical. The anonymous developers' posts on the forum were a cry for help. They spoke of impossible deadlines, ignored warnings, and a culture of fear where raising concerns was career suicide. It was my old company, twisted into a toxic parody of itself. Sending that email felt like setting a precision-guided missile. I knew the CEO of Viridian Corp, InnovateX's biggest client. He was old school, ruthless about risk. The evidence I provided was irrefutable. It wouldn't just be a warning, it would be an ultimatum. The fallout was faster and more spectacular than I dared hope. News travels fast in the corporate world. Amelia's frantic phone calls became the soundtrack to my days on the cruise. I'd see her pacing the deck, gesticulating wildly, her carefully constructed composure cracking with every new piece of bad news. "Viridian is threatening a full audit," she hissed to Sarah one afternoon, not realizing I was within earshot, lounging on a deck chair with a book. "They're talking about breach of contract. Millions, Sarah, millions." Sarah looked genuinely worried. "We need to get ahead of this, Amelia. Issue a statement. Reassure the market." "Reassure them with what?" Amelia snapped. "That our flagship product is a ticking time bomb? That my sister, the one I said was unstable, actually knew what she was doing all along?" Her voice dropped on the last part, a venomous whisper. I pretended to turn a page in my book, my heart beating a little faster. She suspected, but suspicion wasn't proof, and I was Eve, the picture of calm. The final dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. My mother kept trying to steer the conversation to happier topics, while my father looked like he'd aged 10 years. Amelia barely touched her food. She just stared at me, her eyes narrowed. "You seem to be enjoying your cruise, Eve," she said, her voice tight. "It's very relaxing, Amelia," I replied serenely. "The sea air is so restorative. You should try to unwind a little." Her jaw clenched. The captain made a toast to successful enterprises, and Amelia flinched as if struck. Later that night, Marco confirmed it. Viridian Corp had frozen their contract with Innovate X, pending a full independent security review. The first major domino had fallen, and Amelia knew deep down that this wasn't just bad luck. It was targeted. But she couldn't prove a thing, not yet. The months that follow the disastrous cruise are a slow, agonizing bleed for InnovateX. The Viridian Corp audit uncovers more flaws than even I anticipated. Other clients get spooked, stock prices plummet. Amelia is in a constant state of crisis management, her public appearances more strained, her carefully crafted image of a tech visionary crumbling into that of a desperate failing CEO. My parents, caught in the crossfire of their daughter's imploding empire, call a family gathering. A summit, my father calls it, his voice heavy with a gravity that signals the end is near. We meet in the sterile boardroom of my father's investment firm, a neutral territory, though nothing about this situation feels neutral. Amelia looks haggard. The designer clothes hang loosely on her frame, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer can hide. Sarah is there, looking equally stressed, the bravado gone. My parents are somber. Innovate X is facing bankruptcy, my father announces, the words hanging heavy in the air. Unless there's a significant cash injection, a bailout, he trails off, looking pointedly at me. Amelia finally breaks. Tears stream down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. Eve, Alexandra, please. Her voice is a raw plea, stripped of all its usual arrogance. You have to help. You're the only one who truly understood the technology. The Phoenix OS, it was always yours. I messed it up. I admit it. Please come back. Help me save it. Name your price. Sarah nods vigorously. She's right, Eve. We need you. The company needs your vision. My parents look at me with hopeful, pleading eyes. This is their chance, they think, for redemption, for their family to heal, for their golden child to be saved by the prodigal one. I let the silence stretch, savoring the desperation in Amelia's eyes, the complete role reversal. Then I smile, a calm, cool smile that doesn't quite reach my eyes. Actually, Amelia, I say, my voice even and steady, I've been rather busy. I nod to Marco, who has been standing silently by the door. He steps forward and places a sleek, unassuming tablet on the polished mahogany table. He taps the screen, and a company logo illuminates it. Nix Systems. The logo is a stylized phoenix, rising from ashes but darker, sleeker, more formidable than Innovate X's. Nix Systems? Amelia whispers, confusion warring with dawning horror on her face. My new company, I explained calmly, founded 3 years ago. We've been operating under a pseudonym, very quietly, developing next-generation solutions. You might have heard of our flagship product, Aura. It's been making quite a splash in the European markets. Viridian Corp, for instance, was incredibly impressed with Aura's security protocols. In fact, they signed a rather substantial exclusive contract with Nix Systems just last week to replace their outdated Innovate X infrastructure. Amelia's face goes white. Sarah gasps. My father stares, dumbfounded. But how? Amelia stammers. Where did you get the funding, the resources? It turns out, I say, my voice dropping a little, when you're driven, when you have a clear vision, and when you know who to trust, you can build remarkable things. I pause, letting that sink in. And speaking of trust and resources, Marco, the next slide, please. The screen changes, displaying a complex web of shell corporations and holding companies. At the center, Innovate X. And connected to it, slowly acquiring controlling shares through various third-party entities over the past year as the stock price plummeted, is Nix Systems, my company. While you were busy mismanaging my legacy, Amelia, I continue, my voice like silk-wrapped steel, I was busy acquiring it. As of this morning, Nix Systems, and therefore I, own a controlling interest in Innovate X. The silence in the room is absolute, broken only by Amelia's ragged breathing. She looks from the screen to me, her eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning, terrible understanding. You did this? She finally chokes out. You orchestrated all of it? The leaks? The Viridian contract? I merely presented Viridian with a superior alternative when they realized the inherent risks in your product, I say smoothly. A product whose flaws you were repeatedly warned about. As for the leaks, information has a way of getting out when a company is mismanaged and its employees are demoralized. My mother makes a small, distressed sound. Alexandra, why? Before I can answer, I deliver the final twist. And I wasn't working alone. I gesture to Marco. Marco isn't just my assistant. He's one of the founding members of a rather unique network. We call ourselves the Phoenix Initiative. We're a collective of individuals who've been wronged, innovators, creators, entrepreneurs who've had their work stolen, their reputations destroyed by people like you, Amelia. People in positions of trust. I look around the room, my gaze lingering on each of their shocked faces. We pool our resources, our expertise, our information. We help each other rebuild, and sometimes we help ensure that those who commit such profound betrayals face consequences. InnovateX was just one of our more personal projects. Amelia looks utterly broken. Sarah seems to shrink into her chair. My parents are staring at me as if seeing a stranger. The quiet, broken Alexandra they thought they knew is gone. In her place is Eve, the architect of their downfall, the master of a game they didn't even know was being played. The power in the room has irrevocably shifted, and it is all mine. The lead up to this meeting was a carefully orchestrated symphony of financial maneuvers and intelligence gathering. Marco, with his network from the Phoenix Initiative, had been instrumental. They were ghosts in the machine, ex-programmers, disgraced executives, wronged inventors, all united by a common enemy: the corporate predators who preyed on vulnerability. They had eyes and ears everywhere. When Veridian publicly announced its security audit of InnovateX, the market had reacted predictably. Panic selling. Amelia, desperate to stop the bleeding, had made a series of increasingly reckless decisions, trying to secure new funding at exorbitant rates, making promises she couldn't keep. Every misstep was noted. Every share that dropped in price was quietly, patiently bought up by shell companies controlled by Nick's systems. I'd watched Amelia on financial news channels, her bravado wearing thin, her explanations for InnovateX's woes sounding increasingly hollow. She blamed market volatility, aggressive competitors, disloyal employees. Never once did she look inward. My parents had called me frequently during this period, their voices tinged with anxiety. "Amelia is under so much stress, Eve," my mother would say. "Perhaps you could talk to her, offer some advice. You always had such a good head for these things." "I'm sure Amelia has it under control, Mother," I'd reply, my tone deliberately neutral. "She's always been so capable." The day Marco confirmed we'd crossed the 51% ownership threshold in InnovateX, I felt a profound, quiet satisfaction. Not elation, not triumph, but the steady hum of a meticulously executed plan coming to fruition. Walking into that boardroom, I felt no nerves, only a cold, clear focus. Amelia's attempt to appeal to my old self, to Alexandra, was almost pathetic. That person was gone, burned away in the crucible of her betrayal. When the Nick Systems logo appeared on the screen, the stylized Phoenix seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Aura, our flagship OS, was everything Phoenix should have been and more. It was secure, intuitive, and truly innovative. We hadn't just copied my old ideas. We'd evolved them, pushed them into the future. The Phoenix Initiative had provided not just funding, but a brain trust of brilliant sideline talents. Amelia's face, as the ownership structure was revealed, was a picture. The dawning comprehension, the sheer audacity of it, left her speechless. She, who prided herself on her business acumen, had been outplayed, outmaneuvered at every turn by the sister she'd written off as broken. "The Phoenix Initiative," my father murmured, his voice hoarse. "What is this, Alexandra? Some kind of vendetta?" "It's a rebalancing, Father," I said calmly. "A correction. Some call it justice. We provide support for those who've been systematically dismantled by greed and deceit. And sometimes we dismantle the dismantlers. Amelia made her choices. She built her empire on lies and theft. All empires built on such foundations eventually fall." My gaze swept over them all. Amelia, pale and trembling. Sarah, avoiding my eyes. My parents, their faces etched with confusion and dawning horror. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been utterly inverted. The pawn had become the queen, and the game was mine to command. The aftermath of the reveal is a stunned silence, then a flurry of choked reactions. Amelia is the first to find her voice, or a semblance of it. She stumbles forward, sinking to her knees before me, a desperate, broken figure. The Armani suit suddenly looks like a costume on a fallen queen. Alexandra, Eve, I am so, so sorry, she manages, tears streaming freely now. Not the crocodile tears of before, but genuine, ragged sobs. I was wrong, terribly wrong. I was jealous. I was greedy. I'll give it all back. The company, the patents, everything. I'll make a public statement. I'll tell the world what I did, that InnovateX was always yours. Please, just forgive me. My parents rushed to her side, then turned to me, their faces etched with a mixture of shame and desperate hope. Alexandra, please, my mother whispers, her hand on Amelia's trembling shoulder. She's your sister. She's learned her lesson. We we were wrong too. We should have listened to you. We should have believed you. Can't we can't we find a way to forgive, to heal our family? My father nods, his eyes pleading. Even Sarah approaches, her usual composure gone, replaced by a tearful, hesitant humility. Eve, I there's no excuse for what I did. I chose ambition over friendship, over loyalty. I live with that regret every single day. If there's anything at all I can do to make amends. Then a figure I hadn't expected steps from the shadows near the doorway, where he must have been listening. Daniel. He looks older, worn down by his public disgrace. He walks towards me, his expression earnest, almost pleading. Eve, Alex, I was a fool, he says, his voice low. Amelia, she twisted everything, made me believe you were unwell, but deep down, I think I always knew. I was weak. I let her manipulate me. But I never stopped loving you. Not really. The woman I fell in love with, the brilliant, passionate Alexandra, I see her in you now, stronger than ever. Can we ever find our way back? I look at each of them, Amelia kneeling at my feet, the picture of contrition. My parents, desperate for absolution. Sarah, offering a shaky plea for forgiveness. Daniel, attempting a resurrection of a love he himself helped to kill. Their words, their apologies hang in the air. 3 years ago, these words might have meant something. They might have soothed the raw wounds. But I am not the Alexandra they broke. I am Eve, forged in the fires of their betrayal. I take a slow, deliberate breath. I look at Amelia, then my parents, then Sarah, and finally Daniel. My expression is calm, unreadable. No, the word is quiet, but it lands with the force of a gavel, simple, unequivocal. Amelia flinches as if struck. My mother gasps, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel's hopeful expression crumbles. Sarah just bows her head. No, I repeat, my voice gaining a quiet strength. Apologies are easy when you've lost everything. Forgiveness is a currency you haven't earned. You didn't regret your actions, Amelia. You regret the consequences. You didn't value my trust, parents. You valued Amelia's success. You didn't cherish our friendship, Sarah. You cherished the proximity to power. And you, Daniel, my gaze is ice. You didn't love me. You loved the idea of me and then the convenience of my sister. I stand up, looking down at Amelia. As for Innovate X, it's tainted, built on lies, sustained by deceit. It's a monument to your greed. I turn to Marco. Marco, you have the dissolution papers ready? He nods, producing another file. Yes, Eve. Nick's systems will absorb any viable assets and personnel who wish to work under ethical leadership, I announced to the room. The Innovate X name, its toxic legacy will be dissolved. It ceases to exist, effective immediately. Amelia lets out a choked sob. My father looks like he might collapse. This isn't about revenge anymore, I say, my voice devoid of malice, merely stating a fact. This is about consequences. It's about clearing the ground to build something better, something true. You all made your choices. Now you live with them. I turn and walk toward the door, Marco following. I don't look back. The pleas, the tears, the shattered hopes of my former life fade behind me. The cycle of their destruction, initiated by their own hands, is now complete by mine. And I feel nothing but the clean, cold air of freedom. 1 year later, I'm sitting on the private terrace of my villa in Santorini, the whitewashed walls a stark contrast to the deep azure of the Aegean Sea. The setting sun paints the sky in hues of orange, pink, and violet. A gentle breeze rustles the bougainvillea. Nick's Systems, under my leadership and the new name Aura Innovations, is thriving. We're lauded for our ethical practices, our groundbreaking technology, and our commitment to fostering genuine talent. The Phoenix Initiative continues its quiet work, a silent guardian for innovators worldwide. I'm not alone. Beside me, sharing a glass of crisp Assyrtiko wine, is Liam, an architect I met through a charity project funded by Aura Innovations. He's kind, intelligent, with eyes that hold no shadows of deceit, only a warm, steady affection. He knows my past, the broad strokes of it, and he admires the strength it took to reclaim my life, not the methods of my revenge. With him, there are no games, no hidden agendas, just an easy companionship that feels like coming home. A few months ago, there was a brief, unexpected encounter. I was visiting one of our new R&D labs in a quiet tech park. As I was leaving, I saw a familiar figure working at a reception desk in the lobby of an adjacent, much smaller and far less glamorous company. Amelia. She looked ordinary, humbled. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple blouse and skirt. Her hair was tied back neatly, no elaborate styling. She was thinner, and the lines of stress around her eyes seemed permanently etched. She saw me. For a moment, that old panic flickered in her eyes. Then it was replaced by a weary resignation. She didn't try to speak, didn't try to approach. She just looked down at her desk, a flush rising on her cheeks. Later that week, on an impulse I still don't fully understand, I had Marco reach out. Not to her directly, but to the HR department of that small company. An anonymous offer was made, a junior administrative role within one of Aura Innovations' philanthropic arms, a small foundation supporting underprivileged students in STEM. The pay was modest, the work unglamorous, but it was dignified. It was a chance. Amelia accepted. I never spoke to her about it. It wasn't about forgiveness, not really. Perhaps it was a final lesson, that true value isn't in what you take, but in what you build, and what you give back, however small. Or perhaps it was simply me closing the final chapter, ensuring that the ghost of what she did no longer had any power over the quiet satisfaction of my present. She was no longer a villain, no longer a rival, just Amelia, a woman trying to find her way, stripped of the false power she'd once craved. My parents? We have a tentative, carefully managed relationship. They are making an effort, a slow, painful journey of rebuilding trust I'm not sure will ever fully be restored. They see Amelia in her new, humbled role, and they finally, truly, understand the depth of her deception and their own mistakes. They are proud of me, of Eve, of Aura Innovations. But there's an unspoken sorrow that always hangs between us. Sarah disappeared from my life completely. I heard she moved abroad, trying to start over. Daniel, I believe, is still trying to crawl his way back from obscurity with little success. Their choices led them down their paths. Liam touches my hand, bringing me back to the present, to the breathtaking sunset. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asks, his smile gentle. I lean my head on his shoulder. "Just thinking how beautiful the horizon is," I say. And it is. The weight of the past, the burning need for revenge, it's finally lifted. It's not forgotten. The scars are still there, faint lines mapping a history of pain and rebirth. But they no longer ache. I am Eve, I am Alexandra, I am whole, free. And as the last sliver of the sun dips below the Aegean, I know, with a certainty that settles deep in my bones, that the future is bright and it is entirely mine to write. The yacht, the Nyx, rocks gently in the private cove below, ready to take us wherever we want to go next. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel truly, unequivocally at peace.